and brothers that I was about to go to Gaza. And I literally left this bigger circle on Saturday in Orad and went straight onto the plane into the unknown, not knowing what would happen. And I feel so blessed to be here today, to return back to the circle of love, to the circle of remembrance, having come full circle, to express gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All praise is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for He is the facilitator of all the goodness that has come from the flotilla, as people from around the world, 46 countries, mobilized selflessly in acts of great courage to try to break the siege of Gaza. So when I was abducted by the occupying forces, I remember sitting in, maybe I should start with on the boat. Let me start with on the boat and goodness of people. So I remember before I left, I made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in my gratitude prayers. I kept saying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asking, pleading, Ya Allah, I'm going on this boat, and I'm going into this unknown place. We all say, Ya Allah, purify and forgive me for all the mistakes that I have made and will make on this journey. But please, Ya Allah, protect me. And how is the protection that I asked for? I said, Ya Allah, put me on a boat with believers. Put me on a boat with the ones who love you, Ya Allah, and whom you love. And subhanAllah, we had gone from boat to boat to boat, trying to get onto boats because boats were sabotaged, boats were not up to scratch and could not sail, boats had been bombed in Tunisia. There were great challenges. And subhanAllah, by Allah Ta'ala's grace, I ended up in a boat with Algerians, Tunisians, an Irish woman, and a South African. And on the boat was an imam. On the boat were these Algerian brothers, and an Algerian MP, member of parliament, was 71 years old. A beautiful, beautiful sister. And on this boat, we were able to make salah together. We were able to recite Quran. We were able to have dars on the boat. We were able to support each other and remind each other of the prophetic sunnah and to guide each other in being better than we could be individually. And therein lies the beauty of humanity. When I got to the abducted and taken to the prison, the final maximum security prison that we were held in, I remember entering, and we had been deprived of many things initially, and towards the end we were given everything due to consular pressures and all sorts of things. But I remember walking into cell block 5, cell number 1. And the first thing that struck me as I looked around was I saw a triangle on the wall, and on that triangle, written inside was Al-Qibla. Al-Qibla. That had been written by a Palestinian prisoner. We were in a male prison that had the Palestinian prisoners, it was a male Palestinian prison. It was not Palestinian prison. It was an Israeli occupied prison for male Palestinian hostages. And we were there, and I remember seeing that. And for me, that was one of the most powerful moments of absolute sumud and yaqeen, in belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the Palestinian people this position, this lofty position, to guide this ummah, to both guide this ummah, but also to test this ummah as to our firm declaration of Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. remember seeing my tasbih was stolen from me when they stole everything from me and other hostages. All I got back was a dunya with the clothes that I had. Okay. I remember seeing it was, imagine Guantanamo Bay and the barbed wire and the concrete walls. And so there were cells, and we were each in cells. There was an open courtyard, and on the side was like solitary with barbed wire and cages. And as I stood in the squad, I got something really caught my eye, and it was a big set of beans that someone had tried to throw to a person in solitary confinement, and it was caught in the barbed wire. And it was something so powerful. I could picture in my mind someone sitting during a day in solitary confinement, unable to reach the tasbih, but actually making salawat and istighfar and pleading to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in my imaginary, I kept on saying, Allah, Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Another striking memory of mine as a hostage was making salah in the quad next to a blood-spattered wall and standing there and reciting Surah Fatiha and reciting the quls for the many martyrs that had been in that prison. For the many martyrs that were in those prison cells that we would never ever know about. And there was a remnants of a handprint that was on that wall, and I took my hand and I placed it on that blood-spattered dry wall, and I made dua for that Mahmoud, Shaheed, and for all of the martyrs. As we were in the prison, there were ayat of the Quran written on the walls. And one of the ayat that were there was very lengthy, but it was from Surah Yunus. And someone who was trying to write it from memory. And I remember I was in a cell. The percentage of Muslims was very small on this flotilla. And that's very telling, right? The majority of people were from around the world, people of conscience, believing that this genocide is wrong, that this occupation is wrong, and people showed up in their humanity, right? And in our prison, I remember trying to explain to somebody about Prophet Yunus alayhi salam, saying to them, and reciting La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minal zalimin, explaining to them that no matter how dark it feels inside right now, how Prophet Yunus had this darkness inside of him, surrounded by darkness in the belly of the fish, surrounded by darkness, the layers of darkness from the ocean, yet it was the light of the moon that eventually got him out. The belief of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the belief in the rahmah, the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that opened for him. And so this was the conversations that we were having in our different cells, learning from each other's cultures and firmly dedicated to ending this illegal siege and illegal blockade of Gaza. One of the other memories that I had, which is really linked to direct non-violent action. I remember thinking about my time in Karbala, and I remember thinking of being there on the eve of Ashura, some years ago. And I remember thinking about the brave family of Prophet ﷺ. And I remember thinking about non-violence in this context, about standing in the face of such firm propaganda, such firm violence towards innocent people. And I remember thinking about how
we have this call and this power as ordinary citizens to stand firm in direct non-violence against the oppressors. We all have the tools. I remember thinking about the Battle of Badr, where it was only 313 believers against a mighty, mighty army, and the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descended. And I remember thinking about the Palestinian people, how they are surrounded by so many Muslim countries. We are in the majority, and yet we are so weak. And so the challenge for each one of us is to strengthen ourselves, to strengthen our families, so that we can build ourselves up, not in material terms only, but in quality human beings, in educating ourselves and our children in multiple languages, in French, in Arabic, in Italian, in Spanish, to be able to educate our children in tools of how to fix things on a boat, how to be electricians again, how to be plumbers again, how to have technical skills so that we can make a difference tangibly in the lives of people. An incident happened. I remember I shared a cell with Greta Thunberg, a beautiful young woman, climate activist, 22 years old. Ben Gvir kept on pulling her out, getting the soldiers to pull her out of the cell every couple of hours. They made her sit in front of an Israeli flag for hours and hours and hours. They put her in front, kneeling in front of Ben Gvir as he had a monologue of aggression towards her. They brought ministers, high-powered ministers, to this 22-year-old climate activist, can you imagine, who's talking about ecocide within Gaza, to her to try to convince her that we are Hamas, that we are terrorists, and what is she doing with us, to dissuade her from the cause. And as we sat in the cells, in our cell, an incident happened. We had received food and we were sharing. There was a lot of beauty in that, a lot of collective care. We were eating together, and suddenly the door barged open and the soldiers, the female soldiers, came in and said, we needed to move to another cell right now. And we're like, must we take our mattresses with us? Because we had been fighting for mattresses for some time. They said, no, you don't need to take your mattresses, just go. So we were in cell 1, they wanted us to move to cell 12 or 13, I can't remember the number, which is at the end of the hallway. And we got up and we proceeded there, only to find that there were only metal beds, there were no blankets, there were no mattresses. So a few of the comrades went back to the room to get mattresses to bring them back. We successfully put a few in. And then, as some of the comrades, sisters, made their way towards the cell again, to our cell where we were, they were apprehended and stopped by the I0F, this prison guards, to say, we cannot do this, and a tussle ensued, such that one of the comrades was pushed to the ground, another comrade dropped to the ground to encircle her because they were closing in on her. And as she did that, she was pulled by her hair and dragged along the corridor back away from, they were trying to separate them. We in the room, there was an MP, another sister that were tossing and they were trying to protect, and I was trying to de-escalate what was happening within the room, trying to prevent other women from joining in and reminding us of our direct non-violent action. Eventually, the situation was eventually de-escalated. The sisters were brought, comrades back into the room, and we just tried to breathe and just take it down a notch and a notch. The next thing, I look out through the prison door, and I see them putting riot gear on. And before long, there was riot gear and soldiers with weapons in our faces, with laser guns pointed right at us. Unarmed women in a cell, up backed against the wall, kneeled in face of 4 soldiers standing with weapons, with dogs in the back and more soldiers outside. And that is the aggression of these Zionists, of the Zionist regime. They had told us that when it appeared that they were given instructions not to harm, as in like physically attack us. But yet they could not do that. The restraint that they tried had failed in this toss-up that was clear. On I0F, I want to correct something. Yesterday, we were transported when we heard, so we had no legal representation. I attended the trial, my trial. I was at Ashdod. I refused to sign I refused to lift a pen of the Israeli, a pen to sign any single form of the Zionist regime. Some people had signed this deportation, custody orders. People had signed the release forms. I refused to sign anything. And I said to them, take me to trial. Take me to a court hearing, and I will defend myself. I repeatedly asked for a lawyer. I repeatedly asked for consular services, saying that I'm a humanitarian worker. Repeatedly said that my destination is Gaza. Why am I here in Israel? Why am I here? You kidnapped me in international waters and brought me here. What am I doing here? The whole Hasbara about us, about them capturing us in Israeli waters, there's no such thing as Israeli waters. Sorry. So I remember being at my trial in front of the judge. And that was the very, very first time that I met the Adala lawyer. You're at a trial, your case is being heard, you don't have time to even know the lawyer's name. She's introducing herself to you at the trial and defending you in lifetime. That is the most moral, country and democracy of the Middle East. Wow. So the injustices were many. The injustices were many. We were in the first 24 hours. We could not go to the toilet. We had no water. Now try that. Not going to the toilet for 24 hours. No food and no water. The water that was in the prison, the cell was brown and undrinkable, until eventually it was cleared up and the clear water started to flow. Some of our comrades were on hunger strike. The conditions that we saw, that I bear witness to, is bearing witness to what the Palestinians go through. This is not bearing witness about what happened to any of us. And I want us to be clear on that. This is not about victimhood, but this is about testimony of what the Palestinians go through in terms of the injustices on them. You know, a few women in the previous flotilla, they were actually menstruating, my dear sisters. They were denied any sanitary pads. And they wrote with the blood of the wall, Free Palestine, Free Palestine. So the animalistic, dehumanizing extent that the Israeli regime go to is endless. When I got to Ashdod, I was the first boat. We were the second boat. The first boat had Rima Hassan on it. She's an MP from France. They were on that boat. There were 4 of them, I think, and were already in the bay of Ashdod. The next boat that came in was my boat, which is Amsterdam. We'd been on attack for 10 hours. We have had 4 water cannon attacks on us before we were intercepted. Other boats were sunk. Boats were, you've seen all the footage. I haven't even seen anything yet. The third boat in was another Margaret boat, which was also Algerian, and it was the Algerian boat which was Mali. When we got in there, you come in, you're held by two Israeli soldiers. You're taken into the processing lounge, which they specifically set up for us. And they threatened me with violence. They asked me to remove my hijab. I had two pieces. I removed it because of force and threat of force. Removed the underneath, and I kept the top one off. And they insisted and would threaten with violence. And I had worn my hijab from the age of 11, and I'm now 50. And that was the most, to be threatened with violence, to have your hijab taken off, just to say that I'm taking it off now because you need to do something with me to check, and I'm expecting to get it back, and they took it away. And to walk in front of all the comrades that I had just been on the boat with, they were so shocked. These brothers that were so shy for me, so angry at this kind of humiliation with this. When we got processed, we went, after many, many hours, they gave us our prison grey tracksuits with a t-shirt. The women took their t-shirts off and made them wrapped them on their heads. There were other abuses. People were blindfolded, people were handcuffed, people were tied with cable ties. I had flops that were very soft for my feet. The supervisor came to me, accused me of being a terrorist because I had hidden things in the shoes. I said, oh, go ahead, take them. They slipped them and put them through the scanning machine and brought them back. And so these micro to macro aggressions exist all over for Palestinians. There are children that are being held currently as hostages. There are people that are old, that are disabled, that are held as hostages in these Israeli prisons. And so today we're in a moment of the great peace deal, right? There is no such thing as this peace deal. These are legal obligations by the international laws that say that this genocide needs to end. They are framing their legal obligations as a peace plan. They're framing that the ceasefire is a peace plan. A ceasefire and a peace plan are two very different things. A ceasefire deal is a ceasefire deal to stop the genocide, and then to let aid in through your borders. It will be reprieve and relief for the Palestinian people, but we should not ever forget that Israel is not a good faith actor. It has breached deal after deal, agreement after agreement, and intensified the bombardment of Palestinians each time. So let us be wise in how we see these covers of these deals and these agreements, and